Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar on PCI compliance. Everyone's favorite topic, I am sure. If you have any questions for us as we are going through today's presentation, feel free to throw those in the chat and we will jump to those back at the end of the presentation. So with that said, I'm Peter Meredith from Tech Eagles, and I'm happy that everyone is here joining us today. I will go ahead and jump in. So PCI DSS. This is the Payment Card Industry Data Security Standard. Now, a few things before we really get into it. It is not a legal requirement. PCI DSS is created and managed by the PCI Security Standards Council, and this is a council that is put together by Visa and MasterCard and all of the other companies that manage credit cards. And it is intended to protect consumers' payment data. Why does it matter? So PCI compliance matters. It protects your customers. It does do what the Security Council set out to do. And if you process credit cards, you have to attest that you are PCI compliant. And so attesting to something but not doing it is not a good option. It also is legitimately a good security standard, and it reduces your risk of a data breach. Now, who needs to comply? Any person or entity that is storing or handling cardholder data must comply with the PCI DSS requirements. These requirements are regularly updated, and the most recent update was in June of last year. The deadline of compliance for the current version of PCI DSS is March 31st. Yes, you heard me correctly. That is 3 or 4 days away from today, depending on how you count the days. But many people are not really aware that a few years ago, the PCI Security Council realized that it was not enough to simply protect the credit card machines or the large payment processors. They determined that in order to adequately protect cardholder data, the entire network where credit cards are being processed or transferred must meet certain security requirements. These requirements are structured around 6 major objectives. Today, I'm going to run through them in simplified terms. However, these requirements are very specific and very detailed, and they require very intentional implementation. If you're unsure of your compliance level, you can call our office at any time and schedule a free assessment that includes an assessment of your PCI compliance. With that said, let's jump into the 6 major categories and we'll do a brief overview of each one. The first category is building and maintaining a secure network and systems. So this is just a very high level guidelines on how your firewall should be configured. And it covers things like avoiding vendor supplied passwords, making sure that every piece of your network is documented properly. If you have not specified that your network needs to be configured according to the PCI compliant standard when it was set up, it's likely that it has not been configured properly. It is not the default setup for any piece of network equipment. And additionally, you should have documentation on hand that details out how your network is configured in the case of an audit. The second high-level category is protecting cardholder data. These deal with protecting the stored data when it's at rest in a physical location or while it's being transmitted across open or public networks. Now, most businesses and probably almost all small businesses don't actually store the credit card data in their own systems, and they are transmitting the credit card data across a secure platform like PayPal or Stripe or something like that. But it is a good thing to confirm that your business only processes credit card data or stores credit card data in an approved fashion. You don't want anyone to be jotting down credit card numbers on a notepad or something like that. The third category is maintaining a vulnerability management program. So this is something that was added fairly recently to the PCI DSS standards, and it addresses the whole network. So they have realized that they need every computer on the network to use regularly updated antivirus and to have a plan where all of the applications and systems and computers are updated. So every computer needs business antivirus, and you need to have a patch management plan. And these two things work together to ensure that you are compliant. The fourth category is strong access control measures. So this deals with who has access to cardholder data and how are those people identified and authenticated. It's pretty straightforward, but it's also easily overlooked. It's very common that people in the business who don't need to know credit card information have access to credit card information, and that is a very big vulnerability. The fifth category is to regularly monitor and test networks. So you track and monitor all the access, you track and monitor all of the devices and resource, and anything that has access to cardholder data, and then you regularly test those with penetration testing or vulnerability scanning. For many merchants, doing a penetration test or a vulnerability test is a requirement, and they will ask those to be submitted on a quarterly or annual basis. If your business has to comply and submit penetration testing or vulnerability testing in order to maintain your merchant status, you likely already know and have a channel that you submit those reports to. The final category is for maintaining a security policy and ensuring that it's documented and communicated throughout the entire organization. Now we'll talk about what everyone doesn't like, which is the consequences of non-compliance. So you can be fined by card companies. You could have increased auditing requirements. So depending on your merchant level, you might be able to self-attest, meaning you just submit a report that you are saying, I have checked and I am compliant. But in the case of a breach, you may be required to be audited by a third party. And the worst, in my opinion, the worst result of all is if you lose your ability to process credit cards. And think about how many customers you might lose if you can no longer take credit cards as a form of payment. And then think about your reputational damage when your customers learn that their credit card data was leaked from your business. Now, with all of that said, I want to talk about some real actionable best practices for you all as managers or owners of your small businesses. It's important to have regular cybersecurity training for all employees, and I recommend that someone in your business has, the owner or the office manager, a handbook, whether that's a physical handbook or a digital handbook, that documents the network configuration, the system security plan, and your incident response plan. If you don't have those first two things, then I really recommend that you find an IT company that you can work with. We're happy to do that for you to create these. And then lastly, it's really important that your computers are actually being updated and the antivirus is actually installed and being maintained. And so having some sort of monthly report for you as the manager can really help sync that in that you and verify that it's actually being done. So I know that was a lot and I tried to make it as brief and simple as possible. But if you have any questions about PCI compliance, you can just call our office at any time. The PCI DSS website is very helpful if you understand uh, a lot of technical things, but for non-techie people, it's often very confusing and overwhelming. So you can always go to our website, send us an email, or give us a call. With that said, I will turn it over and see if we have any questions before we end our webinar for today. We did have some questions beforehand before we did our webinar. The first one is PCI compliance something that I can do on my own? Unfortunately, it is not something that you can do on your own, specifically because it deals with how your firewall is configured, how your network is configured, and those are things that unless you know how to configure firewalls or how to configure networks, you can't do. So if that is in your skill set, then it is something you can do. But for most people, they will need to hire an external IT company to help them with their system configuration. Another question we had was, isn't just paying for a payment processor like Stripe good enough? Yes and no. So most businesses, small businesses, don't actually process the credit card information. They use another company like Stripe or PayPal or Square um, to actually process the payment. However, the newer security standards are starting to make businesses like Stripe and PayPal and Square collect and enforce PCI compliance on all of the businesses that they work with, because it no longer just complies to the system that is taking in the payment, it applies to the entire network that the system is, that the credit card information is connected to. So that is, if you use something like Stripe or PayPal, you might in the near future start receiving something from them asking for you to prove or attest that you are PCI compliant. If that happens, feel free to give us a call and we're happy to help you make that attestation. All right, I think that is all we have for today. Thanks everyone, and I'll see you next time.